Welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, your host, Zaki Baruti. Like always, I want to first of all give a shout out to my biological family as well as the Universal African Peoples Organization family and to the family of New Life Evangelistic Center ran by Reverend Rice, and greetings to those behind the camera, Bob and Bill. And on that note, we'll have a very great evening with a real positive discussion looking at the issues that impact our community. And I'm very honored for our show this evening to have a young man who happens to right now sit on the Ferguson City Council.
Yes,
welcome
sir.
to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, Wesley Bell.
It's a pleasure, sir. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, then. Wesley, whenever we start our program, I usually like to give the viewing audience a little personal background of the person that we're talking with. So share your background.
Well, I'm as you stated, I'm on the Ferguson City Council. I was elected in April of 2015, so kind of a baptism by fire. I came right in the middle of it, and honestly, to me, that's a badge of honor. I think, as you have done your entire life, when we're called to duty, you got to answer that bell for the community. I also serve as an attorney. I started out in the public defender's office, so I saw it from that end. I would do municipal work, and then I also serve as the head of the criminal justice department at St. Louis Community College, the Florissant Valley campus, which is also in Ferguson as well. I'm from North County. I was actually born in Alton, but we moved to North County when I was in junior high. So I've been here just about, in this area my entire life, and I think that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, okay then. So, Ferguson has recently been in the news, mm-hmm. and of course we know that it made a lot of history in America and actually throughout the world for real. Mm-hmm. And with what had happened, we consider it as the murder of Mike Brown. When we look back at that issue, and so you're a resident of, how long have you been living in Ferguson itself?
I've been living in Ferguson, I guess about 5-6 years. Now I'm from that area, so I went to high school and junior high right down the highway. So I grew up in the area, but actually moved to Ferguson when I started working at the community college. So probably a little longer than it actually. Okay then. Mm-hmm. And in terms of reflecting on Ferguson being in national, international news, of course, sparked by the what we as activists say the murder of Mike Brown. At the time of his unfortunate death and part of the demonstrations taking place there, we had did a study of the percentage of black people living in Ferguson, which at that time was 68% mm-hmm. black. And you had a city council, I believe, of 6 members and only 1 was black in terms of prior to Mike Brown's death, which as an extension that you had a police force of about 53 and only 3 were black. And so we always maintained that politics impact government policy and the community. So what sparked, first of all, were you involved in any of the demonstrations in Ferguson? And then what sparked your interest in terms of seeking office? And was that your first time? So 3 different questions. So I try to attack them one by one. This is the first time I've ever held office. Honestly, quite frankly, I had never intended to run for city council. But when I looked at the issues that were plaguing us at the time, when we were looking at police reform, when we were looking at court reform and things of that nature, as an attorney, as a criminal justice professor, I thought, what else can God tell you to do other than get involved in a situation like this where your expertise lies at the heart of these issues? So I decided to run for that reason. With the,
and this was in 2015.
This
right?
was in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. The unrest started in 2014 in August, and so matter of fact, the first day that it happened, because I actually live on South Florissant, and so
from my front door, you can see the police department. And so I went out there and I believe that was on Sunday. I believe you were there too that day too, on the first day. And you know what myself and others were doing, and because at this point we didn't know what was going to happen here. All we knew is that there's people protesting and demonstrating in the streets. We didn't know what it was going to turn into, but what concerned me was that I saw young people, kids, children in the crowd, because again, since people didn't understand what was happening, they were bringing their kids and things of that nature. And so as the crowd started approaching to where the law enforcement officers were and they were barricaded, that scared me because, like I said, as someone who works in criminal justice, my thoughts are, well, if the crowd gets to that group, something bad is going to happen. So several of us were standing in between, just trying to help keep the peace and keep the crowd between, standing in between law enforcement officers and the crowd as they were getting closer, because like I said, there were kids right in there. So, so my time down there was about peace, being, helping keep the peace. But also I wanted, and once I was elected, I wanted people to see my face so they know, hey, if I have a question, one of my leaders is right here. One of my councilmen is right here. You can talk to me. And I think when you have a lot of young people, which we saw a lot of young people, and that's why I was so happy people like you were there, I think you need some more experienced people to help calm tensions, because the last thing we need are more people getting hurt.
Yes, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at some of the aftermaths of the issues coming out of the Mike Brown tragedy.
We were kicked out and left to live on the streets. I called the hotline, which St. Louis City has this wonderful hotline to call, and I kept getting the word that, sorry, no vacancies, nothing available, nothing available. And I called day and night.
There's a lot of people that are homeless, might be struggling with health issues, and, it's a lot better for us to have somewhere to go to be, comfortable.
I really wish this place would not shut down, because it is the only place that is available for people to go. I know the city says that there's other places, but I know for a fact that when you call the housing resource line, they just don't have anything available 98% of the time.
Most of us are 1 to 2 paychecks from being right here, right at the place that God has put it on your heart to allow people to come. And I've been fed bodily, but more than that, my soul has been nourished. My mind has been nourished with the Word of God and the Word of the Lord. And I have a renewed hope, a renewed vision that I don't know why God put me here, but He put me here, and I'm learning, and I'm able to help other people.
Really would appreciate if this place got left open, because I'll tell you, there isn't no place better than coming here and living, because I felt so blessed by having people who love me and care for me and worry about the things that I do and what happens to me. I didn't have that out in the outside world. I've got it here.
Your spare change could help spare a life, save a life right now. Send your gift straight in to P.O. Box 473, St. Louis, Missouri. It's 63166. Or you can even give online at www.newlifeevangelisticcenter.org.
Hello, I'm Larry Rice, a candidate in the April 4th election for mayor. The reason I'm running for mayor is because I believe the people have suffered enough. St. Louis has gotten way off course when it's come to the basic needs of hurting people. I want to encourage you to go to my website, The People Have Suffered Enough, and there you'll find that I'm very much concerned about economic justice for all, reducing crime in our communities, and equality for all of God's people. I need your help, though. I need you to go to the polls April 4th and tell everyone you know that I'm running. St. Louis City has gotten way off course by spending so much money on football stadiums, soccer stadiums, and everything else instead of the basic needs of people. I'm going to change that when I become mayor of the city of St. Louis. And I will become mayor if each one of you go to the polls and vote. And those of you that don't live in the city of St. Louis, encourage family and friends that you know, offer them a ride to the polls, because on April 4th, we can have a revolution of compassion if you'll get directly involved. And remember, I'm running for mayor.
We're back with Conversations with Zaki Baruti, and in the studio with me is my guest, Wesley Bell, who's a city councilman in the city of Ferguson. What is the population of Ferguson, by the way?
Population is 21,203.
Oh, okay.
Give or take.
And so, being out there, as we had said on the other side of the, before the break, that you were kind of like serving as a peace barrier and to help calm down situations. So was there any particular incident that said that Wesley Bell is going to run for city council?
You know what? I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, go ahead.
It was a culmination of events because, considering, I teach at the college in Ferguson, so I have a lot of young people.
Oh, you taught it in Ferguson?
Yeah, the Florissant Valley campus is in Ferguson, right? It kind of confused people. It's called Florissant Valley, but the campus is in Ferguson. So, a lot of my students are there. A lot of my students and future students were down there at the protest site because we had a lot of people in that demographic. So one thing that, what I did was I organized on a couple different occasions some of the professors at the college to go down there and pass out informational materials on the college, because that's an opportunity to get some of these kids into the school and help them get an education. So my thoughts were, why not try to take this and make something positive out of it? Because I think, as you know, and I always say, access to education is the new civil rights. That's the great equalizer. If we get people in schools, that changes their plight more drastically than anything else, other than getting active in politics and things of that nature. I just thought it was important to do something positive to try and reach some of these kids that we honestly don't have any other ways to reach.
Now, prior on the other side of the break, as we mentioned, and I was saying on the date of 2014 in August, you only had one black out of 6. How many blacks sit on city council now?
3. Now 3. The council is half African American, 4 women. So it's a very diverse council. Okay,
so it's moved forward from that date. So that was a positive outcome.
That was absolutely
as an extension of the tragedy. Now, what would be some positive outcomes? And then I know the Justice Department had issued a consent order. Let's deal with the consent order, and then let's look at, from your perspective, positive outcomes out of the tragedy in Ferguson.
Okay, well, I'll start with respect to the consent decree. I'll first start with the community policing. Now, anybody who knows me knows that that's my big issue, because nothing goes to the heart of building that trust and confidence between the community and government than law enforcement. If there's a pothole in your street, you're gonna be upset about it. But once that pothole is fixed, you're good. But when something happens or some tragedy happens with law enforcement, those wounds don't heal so quickly. So community policing is about those interactions between law enforcement and the community. So the law enforcement isn't looking at the community as a them, and the community's not looking at law enforcement as a them, as opposed to looking at one another as a we. It's hard to hate people that you know. And so that's one of my biggest issues. And those changes were implemented even before the consent decree, and now have continued with the consent decree. And I'm glad to see that. Secondly,
now when you're talking about neighborhood policing, though, and that's one of the core parts of the consent order. So are you looking at the transformation as to who do the policing? Because we always have maintained that, the community the police force ought to reflect the ethnicity of the community in which they patrol. Is that's happening in Ferguson now?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I could not agree more with you. It's just a fact of life, is that if the more I relate to you, the more that trust level goes up. And the more you relate to me, the same thing. So yeah, I think that it is important, and there has been an increase in the number of not only African Americans, but women in the police department. Now, having said that, you can't just fire people, especially, there's some, I'm not gonna sit up here and be hypocritical. There's some good people in that department. I think it was more of the culture. The culture was not about community policing. And I said this growing up in that area when I was a young man, early 20s. I didn't like driving down New Florissant at night. And it's kind of like Jennings Station Road. Like Jennings Station Road, I wouldn't go pick up money in the middle of the night.
And now, why is that?
Because I was going to get pulled over.
Oh, so the case of the driving while black.
You know, we all know that it existed.
Yeah, okay,
we know that it existed, and that's why I say there had to be a change in the culture, and you're seeing that. And I've talked to a lot of the officers, white and black, and you can see them embracing that because now it's being implemented top down.
So you have a new police chief there.
Absolutely. Chief Delrish Moss. He's doing an excellent job. He's got out there and knocked on doors. He's tackled the issues. He is not hidden at all. He is forward and center, and I think so far he's been doing an excellent job.
So just to close out that part on the police department, so statistically, what are the racial statistics
on
the police?
I have not looked that up, but you have several more, not only Chief Moss, but also Commander McCall, who was the chief in Berkeley, is now with us, and he is, among other things, our liaison with respect to implementing the consent decree, and he's working with our neighborhood policing associations. What I didn't mention, what I think you would be interested in, is that we're the first St. Louis County city to implement a civilian review board. That was just completed.
Is it with subpoena power?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. But this was worked out in coordination with the Department of Justice. Now, the process started prior to, but once the consent decree was entered, this was worked hand in hand with the Department of Justice, and so they've also signed off on the civilian review board.
Now, when we talk about the consent decree, what would you say were the top three major components? And we're gonna have to again take a brief break, and then we'll be right back so that we can get into those key points and whether or not there have been reform municipally in the courts.
I'm Nicole Warrington. I'm a resident of St. Louis City.
My concern with today is I'm glad that people have come out to share and support for the homeless in downtown St. Louis.
This is my first time in this facility, and what I'm learning and have heard today is that this is a place that people can come when they are in need in an emergency situation, that this has been a place that has allowed people in desperate situations to get back onto their feet.
I've been a member of working in this project of helping people get off the streets.
We have people in the group here who are working to save this facility who, it turns out, were themselves residents here and were able to get back on their feet because they had this place to come to when other shelters and facilities in the city would not take them in.
I think what's happening at New Life is a travesty. They changed all the signs. They have criminalized parking on Locust between 14th and 15th Street. And I think that is a travesty within itself.
I recommend that people come see this place because I also had been a bit skeptical because I was reading news reports and reading what the St. Louis Post-Dispatch has published and what others have said on Facebook.
When I saw the Riverfront Times and it talked about New Life as a fallout shelter, I work with this population 5 days a week. I've not seen one person have a 911 call from New Life for K2. Mr. Rice is on the front of the Riverfront Times as a fallout shelter when there has been no K2 epidemic in New Life at all.
Today I came down to see for myself, and this place is filling a vital need, and we have to support it.
Homeless lives matter! 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 Homeless lives matter!
Hello, my name is Maxine Johnson. I fought against eminent domain. A mother with 6 children trying to take my property. Pastor Rice was the only media that covered the story. The American newspaper didn't cover it. Let me tell you something about Pastor Rice. 3 weeks ago, I had a man call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 degrees. They kicked out of her house, need a place to stay. Pastor Rice, Larry Rice Shelter was the only shelter open during the midnight hours.
Only shelter.
Right now, this is what we are doing. 90% of the people are black folks, look like me. We need to keep this building open.
Homeless life, line up. Homeless life, can't hear you. 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 Homeless life, can't hear you.
We're back with Conversations with Zaki Baruti, and in studio with me is a young attorney and Ferguson City Councilman Wesley Bell. We were prior to the break getting ready to focus on what you would consider the three major components of the consent decree that was developed between the Justice Department and Ferguson City Council, correct?
Yes,
okay.
and I've mentioned community policing. So that would be one. Second would be, and what's near and dear to my heart as an attorney, is the court reforms that have been implemented. Ferguson, prior to the consent decree, and then along with the consent decree, have implemented some of the most progressive court reforms in the region. And so I'm proud to be a part of that, getting rid of, we were before Senate Bill 5, which many people know about, was the bill that addressed some of the issues that we saw in our courts. Prior to Senate Bill 5, Ferguson.
Now, for our audience, they have no idea what may not know. Senate Bill 5. What was Senate Bill 5?
Senate Bill 5 was the Senate bill that addressed the court issues that in some ways clarified some of the things the court should be doing, and in some ways changed some of the things the court should be doing. So when we're looking at the way that municipal courts put out warrants and incarcerate people, those things were addressed in that Senate bill, which was all through the news, and which I think was a good bill. Now, one thing they did was they kind of targeted St. Louis County and said, well, St. Louis County can only take in 12.5% from revenues, but the rest of the state can take in 20%.
Revenues from
the courts.
Right. So based on traffic stops.
Based on traffic stops, anything from those municipal courts.
Right, okay.
Anything, not just traffic courts.
It's
traffic
not just
stops,
traffic.
right.
Okay.
So I think that's probably unfair. I think what's good in St. Louis County should be good throughout the state, but everything else in the bill I think has been great. And what I like is the fact that they took a lot of the things we did in Ferguson and implemented them into that statewide bill. So for example, failure to appear fees. What I noticed is when I worked in courts is that you get a file, you see one ticket that should maybe be a $100 fine. But now it's up to $700 because the person missed several court dates, and now they got $700 worth of fines, and that's not fair. So failure to appear charges are no longer charged in Ferguson and in St. Louis County. Holding people, for traffic tickets and things of that nature, you're limited in how long that you can hold them. And if you do hold them, they have to be able to see a judge within 24 to 48 hours. And I think that's a great example of progress that's been made. So, one thing, and one thing I'll say is that being a councilman in the most famous small city in the world, probably, the progress and reforms that we implement there or in Ferguson reverberate throughout the world and show what change can look like. So some people say, well, why are they picking on Ferguson? To me, I look at it as an opportunity to show people how it can be done correctly and how we can, and what change can look like.
So with that said then, and looking forward in terms of you being at Ferguson City Council, what are your visions for Ferguson?
My vision, first and foremost, is for Ferguson to have not only a quality police department that implements community policing, but the gold standard of police departments. I want other communities to come and look at us and study us to improve their police departments. And we got a ways to go on that, but we're going in the right direction. I want our courts to treat everyone fairly. We recently had Judge McCullen, Donald McCullen, who passed recently, and we brought him in, and he served as our judge through a very rough time, and he had retired from the state courts right here in the city, and so he came on and actually called him and asked him to apply for it, and he did that, and he helped us whip those courts in shape, and now we have Daniel Brown, who is our judge, and he's doing an excellent job. And so I just want to make sure people are treated fairly when they come into our courts, and hopefully throughout not only St. Louis County, but the region and the country.
We have just a short time left with us. Ferguson most recently, as I started the program, has been in the news again with the release of some surveillance tapes at a local market. You want to address that?
Yeah, first I want to say this real quick because you asked me for 3 things. The third thing is community engagement. One thing that I'll take for the rest of my career is that you have to have that community engagement. You have to make sure that you are engaging the residents because many feel disconnected, and that gets them back involved in the process. And if everybody's involved, that's when we can move mountains. So to your next question.
All right, to the next question would come at the flip side of the next break.
Okay.
All right.
Time for us to clean out City Hall. It's become a cesspool of corruption, benefiting the rich and the powerful, forgetting the very basic needs of the people. A clear illustration of that is that they want people to vote for a soccer stadium on the April 4th ballot. I'm Larry Rice. I'm running for mayor, and I'm tired of seeing poor and elderly people pushed around. Now, we can change things, have a compassionate revolution in the city of St. Louis if you'll go to the polls April the 4th and encourage everyone you know that lives in the city to do the same thing. Go to www.LarryRiceForMayor and see the difference we can make.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. Again, in studio with me is Ferguson City Councilman and attorney Wesley Bell. On the flip side, I was getting ready to ask you to really briefly speak to Ferguson being in the news again with this surveillance tape being released of Mike Brown in a convenience market, allegedly leaving some marijuana and what have you. But anyway, address that.
You know, and just so the viewers are up to date, there was a video that had been released shortly after the incident happened in August of 2014, which gave the appearance that Mike Brown was robbing a store. This documentary came out that gave us, I guess, another side of the story. It made it appear as though there was some bartering going on for marijuana. And then there was the full video release, which, and as I told you, I have been dealing with some personal situations, some deaths in the family, so I hadn't been able to follow too closely, but I have been following. But apparently a video I have not seen is the entire video, which shows that there wasn't bartering. At least that's what the reports that I've read say, so I'm not certain. You know, what I would say is whether you want, you know, I don't like kicking the dead. You know, that young man lost his life. You know, that would have been one of my students. I would have liked to been able to mentor him. And so I don't see any purpose in calling him anything, a robber, drug. I call him a young man who, you know, who had his entire future in front of him. I met his mother and father on many occasions, and I admired the strength that they showed through this. But you know, the bottom line is we don't have all the facts, even on the council, the city council. We don't get all the facts because we're not part of the criminal justice process, and there is a wall there, so we have to respect that wall. But I'll say this though, my understanding is that the matter is being investigated. We are supposed to know more about it, but it still doesn't change the facts at hand, whether he was going in there just to buy something or not. We're gonna find out at the end of the day.
Well, with that said, you know, we will invite you back to the program after the finding, And we again want to congratulate you on your sterling victory and as a Ferguson City Councilman. And we hope that you have a real beautiful, bright political future ahead of you.
Thank you, Zaki.
So on that note, you've been listening to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. Tune in at our next show, and want to say God bless everyone that's in the viewing audience.